much, Jeff. Thanks very much for having me, and good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, I mean. It's been a long day already. As Jeff mentioned, I'm the head coach at Lee Hecht Harrison in New York, and I also run Stanford. And the purpose of my coming to these is it was started in 2011 by a former client of mine, Tim Hom, and Tim wanted to pay it forward. And I see he has paid it forward. We've got about 50 people on the call, and it's to help people with their job search, with networking, with content, with really doing everything you can to land. And a lot of it has to do with networking and metrics. And if you're sort of hanging out with the same 20, 30, 40 people, it's much harder for you to land. So I do hope you're taking advantage of this meeting and meeting with everyone on the phone, collecting people's email addresses, linking in with them, and trying to have conversations with them so you're not spending a lot of time alone and online and applying and researching, really doing the human piece, because that's the piece that helps you get a job. So I wanted to talk about all things money because a lot of people don't want to talk about all things money, and I thought this would be a safe environment to do so. I have seen a lot of change in the marketplace on consulting, more and more consulting in every single industry at every single level that you could possibly imagine. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that you did was that when you're talking to people in the marketplace, and they're describing this project they're having trouble with and they can't get it going, blah, 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 that you say, oh, and by the way, if this is work I can do as a consultant and there isn't a full-time permanent job, I'd love to do it. It's exactly in my wheelhouse. It's exactly where I have impact. It's exactly where I have experience, and I'm most happy to do that. And they might say, well, how long would it take you and how much would it cost? And you would need to be able to answer then and there. What people often do is make the process go longer and more complicated and have a process orient. And you don't want to do that. They're looking for consultants because it's easier, it's quicker, there are virtually no obstacles, and they're looking to get it done with as less of a fanfare as possible. In addition, they're trying to get people under the wire before the end of the year. They're trying to get some projects done before the end of the year. They're dealing with COVID and a lot of uncertainty. We're in an election year, potential recession, and more separated employees. So the most important thing is to make it quick and easy for them, not for you, for them. So I thought I'd give you the formula for figuring out your consulting range. And then if people have questions about that, we can talk about it. So the way to figure out your consulting is to take your all-in comp, your base plus your bonus. So say it's $100. You would divide that by 230 days, because that's about how many days we work a year, believe it or not. It feels like 365 right now, but it's about 230. And you get a dollar amount, which is what we call your day rate. When you divide that by 8, you get an hourly rate. So again, your base and bonus, total. No equity, don't put in your car allowance, don't put in one-time sign-on bonuses, base and bonus. Then divide it by 230 days, you get a day rate. Divide that by 8, you get an hourly rate. There are 2 ways you can increase that dollar amount. One is, I always used to put in, I did consulting from 98 to 2007 exclusively, and made a lot more money than I do now as a full-time permanent employee. And I increased it about 10%, and I called it wiggle room. And I never told anybody I did it, but invariably the assignment would get changed. And what Nancy wanted, Dana decided was different than what Jeff wanted. And rather than trying to rescope the work or stopping my work, I knew I had wiggle room. So if I now had to interview Mary Beth and Jennifer, and they weren't on my list before, I didn't have to increase the rate or change the rate. I would just say to the client, okay, well, that doesn't change the scope. It does, increase a little bit of time. But, let me move forward on that for you, because I'm trying to make it easy. So if I'm easy with them, they hire me again, and I have an annuity, which is what happened in my business. And they keep hiring over and over and over again, because I don't make things difficult for them. You don't want to be an obstacle to your own getting hired. So that's 10% what I call wiggle room. So the technical term for it is called consultant creep. What happens is the scope of the work creeps up, and they call it consulting creep. And by the time they thought they had a $20,000 assignment, you've nickel and dimed them. So now it's $27,000, and they never hire us again. So you have to be careful that you don't have consultant creep. The second way you can increase it, if there are no benefits, benefits account for about 30% of your salary. So if you're getting paid 100, it's really 130, because that's what benefits cost. So you can up it if you think that the entity that you're working with is going to find it amenable. What I ended up doing was think through the assignment. What else was I getting out of it? How big was the company? How small was the company? How well funded was it? How well did I know the person? Did I want annuity work from this client? Did I want to do something small and reasonable and well, and then maybe get more work? So you have to ask yourself a lot of questions, but that's basically how you figure out your consultant rate and 2 ways that you can up it. Is there anybody with questions? I guess, Jeff, you're going to monitor the chat room maybe? Is that the easiest way to do this?
Yes, I will absolutely do that for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to talk, and again, if there are questions about this, I'll be happy to answer them. Just put them in the chat. Jeff will call me out and I will be happy to answer them. Again, consulting is growing, and I would repeatedly say to every single man, woman, and child I meet, and by the way, I'm happy to do that as an assignment for you. If that would be easier for you, I'm happy to do it, because you got to get your nose under the tent. In general,
one question on that is, what do you think of people who offer you advisor fees or advisor consulting, where maybe they give you a share of equity in the company in exchange for a bulk of work?
Of course, there are some companies that don't have any. They don't have the financials to support you. What I don't want to do is my guy gets nothing and everybody else is taking money out of this thing. So if there's no money to be taken out of and there's no money to pay you with, and instead you'd like to be paid with equity, that's absolutely up to you. But then you need to make sure that you monitor how much time you're spending on it, because you need to spend time on getting other consulting and getting other work and getting a job. And so people don't necessarily value what they don't pay for. So be very careful that you're not just being taken advantage of, that they've got some skin in the game. Maybe they're making introductions to senior people. Maybe they've got a variety of other things they can do for you. So then that's fine, 100%. I'm completely happy for people to do free work as long as it's because of something else, not just for the sake of doing free work.
Right. Somebody else asked
in terms of, I see W-2, in terms of W-2 or LLC, you need to ask your accountant about this. I have an LLC. Many of the companies I did work for had an outsourced vendor that they use, and I went through that vendor and actually got paid through the vendor, who then takes a little money off the top. And then other people used my LLC, and other people did a W-2, and some people did a 1099. There are accounting repercussions for all that. So I definitely think an LLC and having one is simple to do, easy to do, and you can keep it. Like, I've worked full time for 13 years. I can't use my LLC. So I pay a small fee to keep it. And so I would do that.
Any thoughts on retainer fees? If somebody wants you to do a certain amount of work a month, of having a retainer fee consulting?
Yeah, I think a monthly retainer is a great idea. Again, I'd figure out how many hours I'm going to spend on it. So am I asking for a retainer fee of $4,000 or $10,000? Depends how many hours you're going to put in. Because if they pay a retainer fee, it's a flat fee. You have to limit your hours. Otherwise, if you're getting paid $4,000 a month and you're working it all day, every day, you have to make sure that that's worth your while.
How is it best to approach questions of their budget as not to put yourself out of their dollar ballpark in terms of doing your scope of work, understanding their budget?
I just used to ask them. I said, well, what did you budget for this assignment? And they'd give me a number, and I'd come in below their number. Because to me, if I wanted it, I wanted it, and it would be an annuity, and I'd watch my hours.
Hi, Charlotte. Elliot, quick question. By the way, it's very good to see and hear you again.
Thanks, Elliot, and you.
Our Chief of Staff. The idea of FICA that comes off the top, and typically if you're coming in a consultant, one has to handle both ends. When you were talking about the 10% wiggle room, basically, if I understand correctly, you're basically coming in, if you take the 10%, at what you were earning before sans benefits, because you're going to have to carry both ends, and I don't think you max out on one of them.
That's correct.
Could you speak to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing to speak about. This is about figuring out what is palatable by the company and doable by you.
Understood. Thanks.
Yeah.
Somebody else asked Charlotte about for full-time work. They've been unemployed for 1 year. How do you negotiate a salary? How do you deal with what your expected compensation is, or how do you get the number up?
Yeah, so we're going to go off consulting and go into negotiating. So I am finding people are continuing to land. The job market has continued to take people back in, even though there are lots of folks being separated. I talked to a very senior person in financial services. They are hiring people, more people back in than the people they're releasing, and they've released thousands. So that's an interesting conundrum. I think on the negotiating, you absolutely have the ability to negotiate. You do not give that up because you are out of work. they have decided that they want you and like you, and they have given you a verbal offer, I highly recommend that you come up with, they call, they give you the verbal offer. I write it all down. I say, this is fantastic. Thanks so much, Sharon. Terrific. I love it. I'm really looking forward to thinking about this. And I will give you a shout tomorrow. Is 11 o'clock okay? And set up your meeting for the next day after you've written down the offer. Then think through of the offer. What are the 5 things I want to go back with? If you go back with 5 things, you'll get 2. You might get 3. I've had a client get 4. I rarely have people get 5 because somebody normally wants to win something. And so you need to give them something like one of my guys, he got PTO and I said, oh, let's ask for 6 weeks. He said, oh, I don't care about vacation. I said, I know you don't care about vacation, but I want them to be able to say no to you. So let's ask for 6 weeks vacation and they'll say no and they'll feel better because they said no, because I don't want it to look like they just rolled over and said yes to everything you asked. And of course we got the 3 things we wanted, which were the 3 most important things to him. And the 2 things, which was to stay remote permanently, was one of them. The answer was no. And the second was a sign-on bonus, which was no, which we didn't care about. And the PTO, they actually said yes, which was hilarious. But at the end of the day, my point is pick 5 things because then you give them a chance to have an out and to say no. So the next day you go back verbally. None of this is done via email. You go back verbally and say, well, this is great. I'm really looking forward, Bob. This is fantastic. The 5 things I was wondering about was this, and this. Do you think you could go back and see if there's movement on these 5 things? And I'm happy, I'm around the rest of today or tomorrow, whenever works. That would be great. Because you want to make it simple, streamlined, positive, based on data. So if the number they came back with is decent, that's one thing. But if the number they came back with is, 40% below, then you need to say, I was having conversations with other companies at this level, and I was wondering if we could get closer to that number. So ranges are always good. Data points are always very good. Doing it verbally and not via email, and having a list of 5 things. 2 that you don't really care about.
Great. Going back to consulting, someone asked, do you recommend communicating the number of hours assumed in the monthly retainer to manage expectations?
I do recommend that because I don't want them to think that for $4,000 it's a full-time permanent role, unless that is your going rate of a full-time permanent role. So I would say, well, I'm on another project, and I would lie. I'm famous for lying. They're white lies, as my mother would say, nobody gets hurt. I would lie, and I'd say, I'm on another project. So Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, I've got 4 or 5 hours I could do that. That's, 9 hours a week, which is 36 hours a month. Do you think that's going to be enough? And then they might say, whatever they say, but then it lets them know if they back into 9 divided by 4,000 or 36 divided by 4,000, they'll be able to figure out my billable rate, which I don't care if they figure it out. That's okay with me.
Great. Okay, 2 more questions. What if they don't say anything about the bonus, only that it's discretionary and depends on the company's performance that year?
Yeah, that's common. What I would say is, can I get a range so I've got a base, that the bonus is going to be between, 10 and 100%, some range like that. Even if I get that in an email, I often don't get it in the letter. Even if I get it in an email, I've at least got a bogey and I've got a baseline of 10%. And I also ask what it's been for the last 3 years. Because if they haven't paid a bonus in the last 3 years, I want you to know you're not going to get a bonus the next 3 years. Because we're not as if we're in the most, terrific time of the year for the next 3 years. This is going to be a tough time. So if they didn't pay out bonuses the last 3 years, they're probably not going to pay out bonuses the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 questions I would ask.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. Someone else asked, what do you think of being a consultant in a company where people get paid what they earn less a percentage for company overhead? Is that common? This means
I think it is actually becoming more common with smaller companies, not with the not with the big ones. But definitely with smaller companies, I've definitely seen that. And I'm okay with that. I don't have any problem with that. It's asking you to be a part of the success as well as the costs, especially if you don't generate revenues. If you're in a job that generates revenues, I might talk more about that. Whereas if I'm in a cost job like risk, HR, technology, a lot of these jobs are what we call cost centers, and you're not generating any revenues. So you contributing to the overhead, I think, is completely doable.
Okay. How about negotiating hourly rates with headhunters versus the company themselves? Some people are saying headhunters are pushing rates very low.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to a headhunter, if a headhunter came into me at $25 an hour and I was at $50 an hour, I'd say, look, I can't afford to do it for $25 an hour. I need to keep looking for other things because I can't afford to do it for $25 an hour. I can maybe do it for 40, but I can't do it for 25. So if 25 is the top, then it's not something I can afford to take, but I appreciate the call and I appreciate you showing it to me. And if you want some references, I can give you other people that I can refer you to that might be more at the 25 level. That might be a way to handle it.
Okay, great, thank you. A few more questions here. The questions are rolling in here. Someone says, isn't it pushy to ask to stay remote and for a sign-on bonus if they hadn't addressed those things during the interview process?
Look, no one on this call is pushier than me. No one. I will assure you, and I don't know 90% of the people on this call. I assure you, no one is more pushy than me on this call. My job is to advocate for the client. My job is to give you the very best advice I can give you. My answer to you is, what have you got to lose? You think they're going to rescind the offer because you asked for a sign-on bonus because you asked to be remote? No one's going to rescind the offer. They've spent 7 months trying to get the right person. They finally got you, the right person. And you're wondering during a global pandemic if you can stay remote. I don't think it's so far-fetched. And a sign-on bonus, you've got 3 other things going, 2 of which might come to fruition. So it's worth asking. The most they could say is no. I've gotten sign-on bonuses in the last 2 years. I've gotten sign-on bonuses for clients, and they never would have asked. As a matter of fact, a bouquet of flowers came to the house the other day, and my daughter said, you know, who did you annoy, mommy? And the answer was, I did annoy this client because I made her negotiate for a sign-on bonus, which she got. And she was stunned and sent me the most beautiful flowers, completely unnecessary, of course, but we're all enjoying them a week and a half later. But I'm so proud of her because I know how hard it was. And they said yes. So you just don't know what people are going to say yes. So give people a chance to help you. Give people a chance to do something wonderful for you. Ask. They might say no, but they won't rescind the offer.
If during the negotiation, maybe the base rate is lower than you expected, but they're promising a large bonus, it's important to get that bonus in writing. Will they do that? Will they put the bonus in writing?
Sometimes. I'd say it's 50-50. It's still discretionary. You're still an at-will person. No matter what you do, you're still at will. They could, you know, separate you the day before the bonus is due. I've seen that too. So I don't count on bonuses. I would still get more into the base. I'd ask for another 15% in the base.
Great. Okay. Next question. After 2 years out of work, will it hurt one's career going to a very, very small company for a year or so to get back in the game?
No.
Okay. And next thing is, should you ask for the offer in writing right away or ask after you go back to them with the 5 questions?
Afterwards. Don't get it in writing, because once it's in writing, you're done. Because they're not going to go back to HR, compliance, legal, and the business to redo the letter. They're just going to think you're annoying, which is why I said, get the verbal, write it all down, getting a meeting the next day, ask for the stuff you want, and then get it in writing. Because once it's in writing, you're toast.
Great. Okay.
And by the way, for the person who's been out for 2 years, I hope that you've been doing some consulting and upskilling during this time, so you have something to show for it.
Great. How do you handle it if they don't move on anything during the negotiation? No more money, no more PTO, none of your 5 asks.
It's up to you. I mean, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm here to give you advice. If it's a decent job, take it. If it's the first thing that you've seen and you think it's really not worth it, then don't. I mean, I think you need to do a SWOT analysis and then make a determination whether it makes sense for you. So do your SWOT analysis, and if it comes out on the positive side, take it. And if it doesn't, don't. It also depends how, you know, can people be out for a year? Has this person been out for a long time? Are they the sole breadwinner? I mean, there's so many questions you'd have to ask before you could say, no, don't take it, or yes, take it. I think there's a lot that goes underneath that. And I think it's a very, very personal decision. And I wouldn't want someone to not take a job and then not make their rent, you know? So I think we have to be reasonable about what makes sense for you as adults.
Okay, I believe I've captured all the questions so far. If I've missed your question, please put it back in the chat and we'll circle back around on it.
Okay, so we were talking about negotiating, we were talking about comp, we were talking about consulting. 2 more things I'll say about comp. One is they have normalized. So I think they sort of dropped precipitously in 2008, 9, 10, and 11 after the crisis. Then they started to creep up a bit, and they have normalized. I have not seen a dramatic drop because of COVID. I have, of course, seen that people get money in their pockets because none of us are traveling and none of us are commuting. And don't laugh, but I have no dry cleaning bill. I mean, I know that sounds stupid, but I'm serious. I was in a suit every day or dress clothes. I was dropping off stuff at the dry clean every Saturday. And so I have hundreds and thousands of dollars of no commuting, no traveling, no dry cleaning, just tons of stuff. I've had one haircut since March. Now, don't, some of you may not laugh about that, but I'm not kidding. Bob Lynch, you can laugh at me, but I've had one haircut. And I got news for you, haircuts are not cheap, but I've had one since February because I'm not going anywhere. And you get to see me as a ragamuffin, and that's life. So at the end of the day, I do think we need to look great, sound great, and be our best when getting a job. So I do think it's important to be compensated fairly. So when you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like heck. You don't feel like you had, got taken or got taken advantage of in any way, shape, or form. But what is fair is different for a company with 17 people than a company, that is huge and has much more resources. So I also think you have to be pragmatic and reasonable during a global pandemic, and also depending how long you've been out. We might have to take a step back because we don't want to be out for another year. And I wouldn't say the market is going to be dramatically better or different over the next year. I think it's going to be steady, but I don't think it's going to be dramatically better. So if you see something and it's interesting and it's cool and it's reasonable for you to wake up in the morning and do it, I recommend doing it. Nothing's perfect now. Nothing is perfect now. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't have COVID and 210,000 dead Americans. So this is an incredible time, a very, very difficult time. I had an appointment with a client today. She canceled. She's COVID positive. And I've got that every day. So I have to focus on the health and well-being of clients and the health and well-being of my family and of all of you. So the most important thing is to stay healthy. That's the most important thing. And then if you take a job that's not perfect and you took it during COVID, it's perfect cover. Because in a year or two, when you come out of that job, no one's going to say, oh, what the heck were you doing? I took a job during COVID that wasn't perfect. That's what you're going to say. And they're going to get it. And they're going to be fine. Other questions on anything related to money?
Yes, someone said, can you still negotiate, or how to best negotiate if you're interviewing based on a recruiter telling you the pay and you want to negotiate outside of that range?
You can still negotiate. Look, the recruiter, you got to remember, the recruiter works for the company. They don't work for you. They work for the company. So they don't want to go back to the company and say, hey, you've got this person and I know you love Ilan, but he needs another $17 an hour. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to go back and do that because it makes the company annoyed at him that he wasn't able to so-called control the candidate. But nobody should control you. You control you. If the dollar amount is not sufficient, go back to the recruiter and ask for a range that is higher. And don't be crazy. If it's 25 bucks an hour and you go in there with 80, I can assure you that that's a little too high. But if you went in there at 40, I don't think it's too high. So I do think you need to be reasonable. I do think you need to use a range, and I do think you should negotiate with the recruiters and let them go back to the company to get a couple more bucks. The answer may be no, and you have to decide, should I take it and work? Because when you're working, you have more leverage to get the next job. So it might be worth taking a lower job because then you at least are in and can talk about how you're in and working. And that gives you leverage. They don't know you're making 25 bucks an hour. You're the only one that knows. Nobody knows but you.
Okay, so someone else asked, what's the number one trend that you've noticed that's been different for job seeking during the pandemic, either in salary or job seeking overall? You said the salaries really haven't changed. What else has changed in the pandemic?
I think the only thing that's changed in the pandemic is the length that it takes is longer because people take longer to get back. So they are also sitting at their chairs. I certainly know. I actually bought a new chair because I realized I was sitting on a terrible chair from 6 in the morning till 10 at night. And I bought an ergonomically correct chair because I'm sitting on the thing for hours and hours. So I would say people are getting fatigued. I think they're annoyed that this pandemic is lasting as long as it has and will and shall be until we have a vaccine. And I do think they may ghost you or take longer. And so I do think that that is something because of the pandemic. I also think people are a little raw because they know someone who's either passed away or who has COVID, or they're concerned, or their kids at home, or they're homeschooling, or their mom or dad are in a nursing home, which of course has a very high rate of COVID. You know, everyone's got something going on behind the curtain. So I just think we have to be more empathetic than ever. And I'm certainly trying.
Right. Someone said they've heard that vacation time is especially difficult to negotiate. That's especially difficult to negotiate vacation time. Is that true, or have you heard that?
I haven't heard that. I've actually heard the opposite. I've heard companies are now saying unlimited PTO. And no, where are you going? I'm going out from here. I'm going out to my backyard to have, you know, lunch. And then I'm going into my dining room to, you know, to put water in my flowers I just got. Like, where are you going? Where is anybody going? I mean, I definitely think you need time off. I don't think you need time to shut down, turn off, and chill. But it's not like we're traveling extensively to Europe for 3 weeks to sit, you know, on the Riviera. I mean, this is not the time to be safe and traveling extensively. So to be focused on PTO is kind of weird to me anyway. But I just think we have to pick our battles. I have not found people fighting about PTO either on the company side or the candidate side. And I do think it is healthy to have time out.
Okay, great, thank you. Someone else said when they offer doing an assignment as a consultant, sometimes the employer shuts down the conversation. Could you speak to how to keep the conversation going about consulting and rates?
Yeah, be able to say it right then and there. If it shuts down, it could be because they were thinking about a job all the time and you made a left when you should have just stayed on the course they set. So if they set a course for a job, you shouldn't be bringing up consulting if they've been talking about a job all along, because it sounds like you're not an active listener and didn't hear what the person said about the job. So you just want to make sure you're being an active listener and following the thread of the conversation. If it sounds like it's an impediment to get the work done because they don't have the head count cleared, that's the appropriate time to say, well, if the head count's not cleared and you'd like me to do this as a consultant, it would take me sort of 8 weeks to really get this thing on the run, doing it full time at, you know, a billable rate that I'm sure is in your budget. What have you budgeted for this? And then they tell me and I say, that sounds perfect. Would you like me to start on Monday as a consultant? And then if you can convert me, great. And if not, I'll still get the project done on time and potentially below budget.
Great, thank you. Can you speak about the importance of defining the scope of work, both from your point of view and from the company's point of view? If they don't really have a concrete idea what they want you to achieve, how do you best kind of press them on that conversation?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to move forward without having a clear sense of what success looks like, because what I have found in organizations is, you know, what Adele wants is different what Elliot wants than what Jennifer wants. So you actually have to meet with a couple of different people to get a strong sense. They typically don't have consensus inside these organizations. It's one of the reasons why they want to bring in an outside consultant, because the inside people haven't been able to move it along. So I would want 2 or 3 conversations so I could distill the messaging, distill what I've learned, and put together a scope of work that I think makes sense, just a one-pager, and then send it along with a thing at the top that says for discussion purposes only. I send that along and I say, this is just for discussion purposes only. And then they can come back and sort of help me scope it out appropriately. But I say, look, based on my conversation with Elliot, Adele, and Jennifer, this is what I came away with. Please jump in here. There's a bunch of stuff I probably missed. And I want the scope of work to be spot on for what success looks like for you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Good questions, team. Very good questions.
Okay. Someone asked, can you repeat the 5 asks in terms of what are the major categories of things that you would want to go back and ask for? I think it's like salary.
I don't determine those categories, you do. So I come up with the number 5 because it's the right number. I've been doing this for a very long time, but you determine what the 5 things are. Some people don't like the title. Some people don't like the location. Some people don't like the money. Some people don't like the bonus. Some people don't like the PTO. Some people don't like the reporting structure. I mean, your 5 things are your 5 things. I don't know what your 5 things are. I customize that for each client who gets an offer. And I say, well, let's go through the offer. Let's see what we got. I mean, some of it has been very complicated equity participations, and I've had to figure out, you know, all kinds of goofy stuff on the equity. And we've had to do a little bit of digging to see what the equity play has been so far. Have they got the Series B going? The Series A was funded when? You know, some of the stuff's complicated. So your 5 things are your 5 things, but it could be any of the things I mentioned or other things I haven't even thought about.
Okay,
Some
great.
people said, one of my guys said to me, I'd love a car allowance. I hate to ask, but where the hell's he going? I mean, I have a full tank of gas in my car that I've had a full tank for like a week and a half. I mean, really, I went to the grocery store, you know, they have if you're over 60, you can go at like crack of dawn when nobody else goes. I go at the crack of dawn, there's nobody there. I drive back from where is everybody going? He wanted a car allowance. I was like, okay, well, whatever. I mean, I guess he's assuming he's going to use the car allowance next year. I bet you $5 he isn't going to use it next year. I mean, it's just a busy, crazy time, but it was important to him. He told me he doesn't want to drive around in a Dodge. I'm not kidding. That's what he said to me. So what's valuable to him is not valuable to somebody else. So I don't pick the 5 things. I go through the thing and you tell me what your 5 things are. And I might lean in and say, hey, I don't like this title. This title's crap. Let's fix this title. Everything's driven off a title. So I'm less focused on the money, but I'm very focused on your title. I'm very focused on your reporting line. I'm very focused on your trajectory. I'm very focused that someone is committed to your job, to you, and to this process. I'm very focused on leadership. What does the leadership look like in that company? So the things I'm focused on are sometimes not the same things as what you're focused on, but you come up with your 5 things is the short answer.
Great, thank you. Some companies force you to apply online, even if you have a referral. How do you deal with the salary question on the ATS?
I put 1 because you can't get through with 0. So I put a 1 because it turns out I've talked to a lot of people about ATS systems. You never get kicked out for salary stuff. So that's good to know. I said, even if I'm too high, and I talked to 3, 2 of them said, even if you're too high, we'll try. I said, oh, okay, that's good to know. So they're less focused on the comp. If there's a range, like one of the things had a range from like 0 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 150, 100, whatever it is, I would take a notch down from where you were.
Okay, great. Okay,
By the way,
next question.
that's because I negotiate well, and you will as well, to get it back up.
What strategies can you recommend for candidates who are looking for remote work only, either full-time or contract? Are there resources, different resources for finding remote work?
I don't know anything about it. I wish I could tell you, but I just don't know.
Okay. Let's see here.
I mean, the answer is I'm sure there are websites, remote work only. So I'm sure if you Google it, you can find out, but I just don't. And it is illegal, for those of you who don't know, it is illegal in the state of New York to ask what your salary was. But what they do now is ask what your comp expectations are. And that's how they get around it. And that's what you can't say, because if you say that, you'll be in the wrong range. And that's when you have to ask them what their range is. And if they tell you it's between 50 and 100 and you're at 100, for you to say, or you're at 150 to say, I'm at the top of the range, and then move forward. Don't get knocked out for money.
And how about if you're in another state, if you're in New Jersey, perhaps, where they can still ask you your last salary and you take a step down in the meantime? How do you kind of work around that or discuss that when they ask you your last salary?
I mean, I would say, I'm not even focused on compensation. I just left and I'm really focused on the right job. And this seemed like the right job, the right people, the right brand, the right products, the right processes. What's the budget for this? Oh, it's 73. Perfect. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to moving forward. 73 is great.
So focus on going forward. Okay, great. Okay, those are all the questions so far.
Okay, I mean, they're really looking to, someone said google.com has a job search app that says remote, that you want to work remote, you can. So good, there you go. Thank you. So lots of people are sharing in the chat. Make sure you save the chat from this meeting, because it looks like people are sharing some resources for you on remote jobs, et cetera, that I don't know about. So I'm certainly delighted that people are doing that. Do save your chat. And do make sure, I'm sure Jeff provides it, that you get a list of everybody on the call so that you can look a couple people up and make some new friends. Nothing's worse than having 50 people that you can have access to and doing nothing about it. I'm surprised how many people, their program will be just about ready to end at LHH, and they'll sort of wake up and notice it's just about to end. Hello, Jean Zapersky. I'm so glad you're here. I have to look for you. And it's just about to end, and they'll say, oh, I meant to do this, I meant to do that, I meant to do that. I said, okay, well, your program ends on Friday. So I'm sorry you didn't do it, and I'm sorry you missed it. Between now and Friday, here are the 5 things I would do if I were you, and I'll give them, based on their needs, the 5 things. But it's always so disappointing, because they had the program for 3 months, they just didn't step it up. So I feel the same way about this program that Jeff is moderating here. and that Tim put together, that you've got this incredible opportunity to do something wonderful meet with new people and not be focused on the same networking people. And, you don't. So there's an ecosystem here, a wonderful support ecosystem. You just want to make sure you're tapping into it and taking advantage. Nice flowers behind you, Jean. Beautiful. I got to Holland before, let's see, I was there a year before last. I'm so glad I went. There's some things in life you have to see to really imagine them. Other questions, anybody?
Sure. Another question came up. We know it can be tough to change industries during this time because of risk aversion, but if you are able to change industries to an industry you want to get into, and there may be a salary difference or a temporary step back, how do you advise approaching that? Is that something
I would do it?
consider?
I mean, if you want to be in healthcare and you're in financial services, you might have to take a drop because it doesn't pay what financial services pays. Most things don't pay what financial services pays. So if you get to do what you want to do and it makes you happy, do it. I mean, do it. I mean, there's no reason not to. I mean, we need to pay our rent. I need to, eat. But you need to figure out, is there a way I can cut costs so I can afford to take this job and make this pivot that would make me really happy? I have someone who had a very senior farmer job and she wanted to go into the not-for-profit sector. And she worked very hard to get into the not-for-profit sector. And she took a big drop in pay. Then she got promoted in the role she was in. And then I stayed in touch with her. I'm still friends with her. And I made her keep a job search. And then she got another job at another nonprofit, 2 levels up from where she was, because she had the not-for-profit experience on her resume and had been promoted in the previous role. So it was fantastic. So I think it's really worth it for your long-term health. And if you can afford to, do it.
Fantastic. Any other questions for Charlotte? I think we got most of the ones that are in the chat, but if there's any last questions, please put them in the chat and we'll ask Charlotte.
And also feel free to just ask them as well. I mean, I guess Jeff has to unmute you, so you have to raise your hand. Hello, Lee, Red Van Lee. Nice to see your face, my dear. I don't recall if the attendees of the meeting were sent out previously.
Yes, they are sent out with the notes. There's an attachment of the sign-in sheet. So I'll repost a link for the sign-in sheet before we leave. So make sure everyone signs in. And then we'll share that contact list with everyone who's on the mailing list.
Okay. And the other thing, I was surprised. I'm going through this now. I wasn't doing it before. I'm surprised how many people are physically not on the call that just have pictures. I must say, if I was networking with someone, I would block them. So I just want you to know you have to put yourself out there and be available to the world. And that means putting your visual on. So to the extent that you're networking without your visual, please know you're not networking. You're not. You have to be seen and expose yourself, your authentic self, in order to be networking, building rapport, and being authentic. So these kind of things are networking meetings, but they're only networking meetings if you show up.
Charlotte, one more quick question. And Jeff and Charlotte, it was just beautiful to see the repartee back and forth, boom, 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 and see you in action. Thank you. And thank you, Jeff. In the past, I found that becoming an FTE basically started with a consultant position. Typically, it was a connection. Someone there brought me in. And typically, it wasn't really consultant. I was essentially working as an employee, as a vendor, and I'd never really hit the ground running as a consultant. So my question to you is this. In the negotiating process, and I agree, probably consultant is the best, you're getting the job done short term or whatever. But let's say you've never, quote, been a consultant. You don't want that to hold you back. But once you get the offer and you walk away with that and you turn around and say, now what do I do now? Any advice in terms of, speak to so-and-so, consult such and such, you want to get your foot in the door, boom, 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 because I really don't have a clue. I know how to go through someone as a consultant to them. That's my question.
So I think consulting is just doing your job. It's just you're paid differently. So one, I wouldn't view it differently. Consulting is just doing your job and getting paid as either 1099 or as a temporary employee. But when I was a consultant, I was treated just as I was as an employee and sometimes better. I was invited to the lunches. I was sent all the emails. I was treated just the same. So I wouldn't treat it any differently. Matter of fact, most places where I did work, they'd say, oh, you're not an employee? And I'd say, no, I'm a consultant here. And they'd say, wow, you seem to know where all the bodies are. And it was because people trusted me and I engaged them well. So one, try to treat it the same.
Okay.
And 2 is I would talk to other consultants. And 3, I would never tell anyone I never had experience as consulting, because the job you did, you were a consultant.
Exactly.
When you had a full-time permanent job, you were a consultant. You were consulting with others to get your work done.
So
And
when-
lastly, I would get a book called The First 90 Days by Michael
yes.
Watkins. Michael has written a wonderful book. It's 100 years old. I've read it several times, and it helps you onboard no matter what your job is.
Great.
And it's called The First 90 Days.
And when is the next edition of your book going to come out?
I'm not doing another edition. I might write another book about network, but I'm not going to, that one's done. But thank you, Elliot.
I mean, and Charlotte, speaking of networking, can you share with the group who may not have read your book so far about the Bring a Dead Mouse and why that's such a powerful
Sure. So
concept?
some of those of you who don't know, I'm a subject matter expert in job search. I've been on CNN and in the Times, the Journal, blah, 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 blah. I have a 5-star book on Amazon called Bring a Dead Mouse, because what I realized was the thing about job search that's different is people are sending resumes around, asking people for jobs, that a paradigm shift was in order, and that what made sense to do was instead think about what was important to the other person and to bring it to them. So if Anne-Marie ran a platform that was based on ETFs, and I knew 2 things about ETFs, and I'd seen a really cool McKinsey report on ETFs, I would send it to Anne-Marie and said, hey, saw this, notice, ETFs are more in abundance than stocks, and these 3 are doing really well, and you were first to call those out. And here's an article by McKinsey that I thought this white paper was superb. Hope all is well, best regards, Charlotte. And that is a dead mouse because it makes Anne-Marie feel good that I thought of her. I validated something that she's working on. I sent her something interesting, and I didn't ask for anything from me. And that dead mouse concept has helped a lot of people get jobs, and I wrote a book about it.
Great, thank you for sharing that. One more question in the chat. The choice between consulting at a higher rate for possibly sporadic work versus a full-time job at lower overall compensation with a possible bonus in 2021 or 2022. How do you gauge the trade-off between the two?
Again, I think everyone has to do their individual SWOT analysis, and the SWOT analysis will lay out which one you should do. So that is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Lay out both jobs next to each other with a SWOT analysis, and then pick the one that wins. You'll know your pros and cons. I gotta believe that the higher pay consulting is probably the better way to go, but unburdened by the facts, I don't know.
Fantastic. I think Elliot has a follow-up question for you. Elliot, you can
Another
unmute
question,
yourself.
at the risk of embarrassing Charlotte, I could do worse. And Jeff, I just have to say personally, it was Alan Greenberg, someone who basically said, you want to borrow the book? And I said, you know what? You're impressed by that person. I want to go and buy the book. And it is not a fortune. You'd be surprised. And it literally can fit in your pocket. Mine is worded. And it just has you've heard it. I mean, it's common sense advice. So I really want to
Thanks, Elliot. I'm going to use Elliot as my publicist. I never really talk about the book. I didn't write it to make money. I wrote it because there were a lot of people that don't have access to me or to LHH. And I wanted to make sure that for a couple bucks, they could have everything that I want them to do, that I need them to do to get a job in their pocket. So it is a tiny little book, and you can download it. And it's just practical stuff, but you got to do it. And it's still hard because you're the one that's got to do it, not me. It's easy for me to talk about it, hard to do.
Great. Fantastic, Charlotte. As always, thank you so much for your continued support of the group and for
Thanks.
sharing your knowledge with us. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, Vince.